Hello, BookTube. I've got some mail to show you on this Digging Out Friday. The sun is weakly trying to reappear. We had a big snowstorm here in Boston, and then the temperatures dropped and they stayed down. So the snow that piled up everywhere hasn't gone anywhere. It hasn't melted right away. And now everybody's just digging out, and there's slush everywhere, and the sidewalks are hard to navigate with a tiny little dog who. Hi, Bean. What you doing? With a tiny little dog who really can't step over much, and she can't really plow through anything either. It was easier for years and years. I had a beautiful pointer who really hated the cold, and a basset hound who was a battering ram. Her center of gravity was so low that it was basically the center of the earth. So if she walked up to a snowdrift, she could just plow her way through it, and we could follow meekly behind. But Frida's not like that. She's as light as a feather. So it's been a little bit tricky. Temperatures are supposed to go back up this weekend, so the snow will not be here next week. But in the meantime, I have mail packages, and they are soggy. They are definitely soggy. A couple of them won't fit through the slot, so my mailman, I've been having an ongoing discussion with my mailman about maybe putting the mail through the mail slot so that you don't have to worry about the sogginess. That hasn't sunken in. So the first one here, as you can see, soaked. We'll just hope that it didn't reach the book. Let's see here. Oh, what's that, baby? Oh, goodness. Okay, this is a finished copy of, what have we got here? Oh my. Cue Bill Rutenberg. It's a Lincoln book. This comes out in mid-January. This is by James Oakes, and it's called The Crooked Path to Abolition, Abraham Lincoln and the Anti-Slavery Constitution. With blurbs from everybody. Just, oh, good Lord, heavily blurbed. The long and winding path to the abolition of American slavery has often been attributed to the equivocations and inconsistencies of anti-slavery leaders, including Abraham Lincoln himself. William Lloyd Garrison never equivocated, even at risk of his own life and limb. He never equivocated, neither did Frederick Douglass. But I don't know who this person's talking about. With this book, award-winning scholar James Oakes uncovers the guiding principle of Lincoln's anti-slavery strategies, revealing a striking consistency and commitment extending over many years. Okay, you want to be careful there. This is a much-studied subject. Lincoln's views on abolition evolved, is the most generous way to put it. They evolved. And they were not set in stone even the day before he made the Emancipation Proclamation. So you want to be careful about attempts have been made in the past many times to enlist him as a kind of secret, lifelong abolitionist. And they don't work. I'm as much an admirer of the man as anybody, but they don't work. So you want to be careful about that. For Lincoln, Oakes' brilliant study reveals the linchpin of anti-slavery was the Constitution of the United States. Lincoln adopted the anti-slavery view that the Constitution made freedom the rule in the United States, slavery the exception. When federal power prevailed, so did freedom. Where state power prevailed, that state determined the status of slavery, and the federal government could not interfere. It would take state action to achieve the final abolition of American slavery. With this understanding, Lincoln and his anti-slavery allies used every tool available to undermine the institution. Wherever the Constitution empowered direct federal action, in the Western Territories, in the District of Columbia, over the slave trade, they intervened. That is just flatly wrong. Is this author trying to say there were no slaves in Washington, D.C. when Lincoln was president? Well, I'll have to read the book to see. As a congressman in 1849, Lincoln sponsored a bill to abolish slavery in Washington, D.C. He entered politics in 1854 to oppose what he considered the unconstitutional opening of the territories to slavery by the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And he attempted to persuade states to abolish slavery by supporting gradual abolition with compensation for slaveholders and colonization of free blacks abroad. President Lincoln took full advantage of the anti-slavery options opened by the Civil War. Enslaved people who escaped to Union lines were declared free. Okay. The Emancipation Proclamation, a military order of the president, undermined slavery across the South, leading to abolition by 6 slave states. Those states then joined the coalition to effect what Lincoln called the King's Cure, state ratification of the constitutional amendment that in 1865 finally abolished slavery. The anti-slavery Constitution guided Lincoln and his allies through every stage of the sectional crisis. In his revelatory account, the author traces this path to abolition, demonstrating that when the states finally ratified the 13th Amendment, it signaled the confirmation of a long-held vision and the realization of the clear anti-slavery strategy founded on the Constitution itself. Okay, well, I'm going to need, this comes out in mid-January, so I'm not going to be reading it now. It's a tricky subject. I wonder what the author, I mean, there's a keep in mind, that was a pub sheet that we read, not the book itself. The book itself is going to have to deal with more complexity than that, because Lincoln, when he took office, he had the right to, if that reading is correct, and if Lincoln's lifelong belief was that if the Constitution allows it and the states don't forbid it, then he can free people, that he can abolish slavery, well, then he took his sweet time doing it and didn't do it until it was politically expedient. The integration of the federal armed services, for instance, I believe that was a completely different precedent. What's the matter? We're talking about Lincoln. Yeah, here we are. I don't know how that's going to come out. I can't see what I'm doing when I move the camera like that. But anyway, this is fascinating. I can't wait to get to it. Still working out the ergonomics of this particular location, this new camera location. What is it, baby? Huh? What is it? What's the matter? I'm filming in this location. You don't mind, do you? Huh? No? I think somebody wants to go for a walk. We'll do that as soon as I finish here. We have 2 more to go. And one of these packages is a box that I believe is from one of you. I think I might even know what it is, although I'm still not quite believing that it's actually going to happen if it is what I think it is. Oh, great. Okay, great. I think we've seen this before. I think we saw this on Friday Reads. This is another work of history. This is by Simon Reed. This is a finished copy of his book, The Iron Sea, How the Allies Hunted and Destroyed Hitler's Warships. I think I've already recommended this to you. But let's read about it since we have a slightly soggy pub sheet here. From Simon Reed, the author of stirring works of military history, comes The Iron Sea, the action-packed story of the Allies' brutal naval engagement during and daring harbor raids to destroy the backbone of Hitler's surface fleet. The sea had become a mass grave by 1941 as Hitler's 4 capital warships, Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, the Tirpitz, and the Bismarck, the largest warship on the ocean, roamed the windswept waves, threatening the Allied war effort and sending thousands of men to icy depths of the North Atlantic. Okay, I hadn't read the pub sheet for this thing before. That's a little bit overblown, just a bit. It was German submarines that were doing most of the icy depth sending. But bristling with guns and steel in heavy armor, these reapers of the sea could outrun and outgun any battleship in the Allied arsenal. The deadly menace kept Winston Churchill awake at night. He deemed them targets of supreme consequence. The campaign against Hitler's surface fleet would continue into the dying days of World War II and involve everything from massive warships engaged in bloody, fire-drenched battle to daring commando raids in German-occupied harbors. And this is releasing just after the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. And I can recommend it. I have already recommended it to you. It is gripping reading. It's not very long. This subject, were it done by, let's say, a heavily decorated academic historian who didn't want to thrill you, could be done at 10 times the length, and has been. But I'm going to forgive it, even having a blurry black and white photo on the cover. I'm going to forgive it even for that, because it's a terrific read. If you are a World War II fan, especially the Western theater, or the naval part of the war, this is a natural, it's a no-brainer to get. Or if you know such a fan, then it's a natural no-brainer to get for the holiday. And then we have this thing. A great big box, very heavy. I think I might know what this is. I'm going to have to see it with my own eyes to believe it. We have a box. The box is bigger than you are. I wouldn't have believed it until I saw it. Incredible. Okay. This is a huge comic book omnibus. This is the Legion, 5 years later. The 5 years later saga. The future isn't what it used to be. Incredible. Look at the size of this thing. Amazing. One of you sent this to me. And after a bit of tongue lashing, because the sender of this book actually lost their job because of COVID. One of the tens of millions of Americans who lost their job because of COVID. And had a pretty rough time during the summer there. A pretty rough time. Now, that sender, in the meantime, informed me that they had found a new and much better job, that all the arrears were put in order, that everything was fine now, and that for gratitude or for the holidays or whatever, they wanted to send me a present. This is above and beyond the call. Look at this. Incredible. I cannot thank you enough. I will Voxer the sender and thank in high squeaky tones. This is actually a story arc, a huge story arc that I've mentioned many times on this channel before. DC Comics' Legion of Superheroes is the story of an idealistic group of teenagers from different planets, 1,000 years in the future, who use their superpowers, either natural born or artificially acquired, to fight evil, to help out in natural interplanetary disasters and whatnot. They're not part of the police. They're their own thing. They're the Legion of Superheroes. And they were a hit for 50 years for DC Comics, on and off, either the backup in somebody else's comic book or with their own comic book. And then for a while, they were canceled. And the writer and artist Keith Giffen, who had done many stints on the Legion's books over the years, got permission to do a story set 5 years later than the 30th century that readers knew. A very different 30th century. The 5 years later saga finds us with an older Legion. They are now in their early 20s. They're not kids anymore. And the universe, the galaxy, has gone to pot. Cynicism has crept in. Violence has crept in. The Legion has disbanded and is no longer a force for good in the solar system, in the galaxy. And the members have scattered all around. They've been maimed or embittered by war. They've been enfeebled by addiction or just simple indifference. And Giffen wanted to do a story along the lines of getting the band back together, of what would happen if the idealism that characterized the original Legion of Superheroes were rekindled in a galaxy that badly, badly needs it. And I was skeptical of that. I don't like that kind of a premise at all, whether it's Star Trek or whether it's the Legion. I don't see the reason why you have to tear down optimism. And I was blown away by the first issue. The very first issue blew me away with how intelligent it was, how amazingly done it was. Everything on just the next level from even the great stuff that Keith Giffen had done before. The type of thing where you immediately realize that you're looking at a classic iteration of a comic. We've talked many times about how comics they'll just be puttering along, and then suddenly the right artist and the right writer combination will suddenly make an arc in that comic book's run that is just widely recognized as great. And then writer or artist will disband or leave, and the mojo will go away for a while, and then you're buying the comic out of loyalty, but you're not thrilling to that arc anymore. And this was I knew immediately that this was one of those things. And it went on for years, and after about 10 years, I thought, well, surely this is going to be collected someday, and it never was. Plenty of other Legion stuff was collected, but not this. And it was announced and postponed, announced and canceled over and over again, and then finally it was announced and looked real, and then it came out. So the 5 years later saga is now finally in a volume. And this is more information than you want, but the reason that the character, I would not have chosen this cover. I would have chosen I think it was the cover to issue number 3 of this run, or maybe issue number 4. There's one issue in the single-digit numbers of this run that had the perfect cover for this, and maybe it got it in the bookstore edition or whatever. The reason why these Legionnaires look so young and so heroic is because going on into the saga of 5 years later, the older Legion finds a batch of clones of themselves who are much younger and have the classic costumes and the youthful idealism and energy. And suddenly you have a narrative tension set up there. Okay, are the older and more cynical Legion members the clones, or are these younger members the clones? And what's going to happen to having 2 members of the Legion? And it's possible that DC Comics got some nitpicky letters from Boston or from Iowa about how quite a few of the Legionnaires don't have superpowers that would be duplicated by cloning. Cloning is not magic, right? If you clone, like for instance, can we come up with an example here on the cover? Okay, no, let's see here. Okay, this character right here is named Shrinking Violet. Her code name is Shrinking Violet. This right here is a character named Andromeda. They have superpowers. This character can shrink to microbial size. This character is super strong and invulnerable and can fly. And those are natural, born qualities. So if you cloned them from cellular material, the clone would develop those powers. Same thing with this character here. But for instance, Lightning Lass and Lightning Lad, Sun Boy, Invisible Kid, a lot of the marquee characters right on this cover have powers that would not be duplicated by cloning. Anyway, that's why you have this cover this way, which is not even Keith Giffen artwork. I really don't agree with the cover choice at all here. This is the kind of new cinematic artwork that Keith Giffen did for the main art chores of this series. And I think the very least you could do if you're doing a volume like this is to put his artwork on the cover, since the whole thing was his brainchild. But one way or another, this is a huge number of issues of the 5 Years Later saga, and one of you actually went and got this thing, even at a bargain website. It's not cheap. Incredible. Okay, all right. I'm going to have to control myself, or I'm going to spend the next 20 years just poring over this thing. So that's our Steve Pyramid. We have the Legion of Superheroes, the 5 Years Later saga, finally collected in a big hardcover. Then we have the Iron Sea, the Allies versus Hitler's Navy, and the Crooked Path to Abolition, a new look at Abraham Lincoln's views of the constitutionality of abolition and the constitutionality, therefore, of slavery. Fascinating stuff. No, nothing that I was going to get in the mail is going to stand a chance against the Legion of Superheroes, but nevertheless, I wanted to show it all to you. So I'm going to wrap this up. I obviously have an impatient schnauzer on my hands, so I'm going to go deal with that. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.